On Daf 11 of Pesachim, we get a principle that I think is incredibly relevant to what we're going through today. But as lots of the principles that we learn in the Gemara, they come sometimes through more obscure examples that we can't quite relate to as much. And that is absolutely the case here. So what do we have as the case? The case is you've got an animal from the firstborn of the animals has to go to the priest, and there's something wrong with it. There's something like its blood needs to be released in a way. It needs to have some bloodlet. And if you do it in a certain way, it causes a blemish that makes the animal kind of like unfit as an offering. And this is a bad thing to be happening to this animal. You don't want to allow that. And really, you don't want to allow anyone to be letting the blood at all or be causing any type of blemish. But you have like the significant ones and you have the insignificant ones. And it points out you have to allow the insignificant blemishes, the ones that would not make it pasul, may not make it invalid as an offering. Otherwise, they're not going to sit by and watch their animal die because it can't get the treatment it needs. And you're going to wind up basically forcing people to do something in an illegitimate way if you don't give them a legitimate way to do it. So you've got a worse way, causing a blemish that would make it invalid as an offering. Don't do that. But to make sure people don't do that, you have to give them a permitted way that wouldn't make it invalid, but still allows them to save their animal, because they're not going to sit by and watch the animal die. Now, how is this relevant now? I find it very relevant. I think about the lockdowns. And the lockdowns have been, to me, something that I personally struggled very much with. And I think it's fairly safe to say that I've engaged in more criminal activity since Corona began than I have my entire life up to that point. Like every time I walk outside of my house without, putting my mask on, the minute I leave the door, I'm engaged in criminal activity. So much of what we do is like, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. And I personally have not followed all of the rules. And I imagine some of you have not followed all of the rules. And it's a very difficult situation. But the most difficult part for me of the entire time was the very first lockdown. We're here in Israel. We were told we couldn't go more than 100 meters from our home. And up to that point, I'd had a good practice of running every day and getting good exercise. And suddenly I couldn't wind up going more than 100 meters. I couldn't really go out and get that exercise. And I really struggled. I put on a lot of weight and it was a very difficult time. And the funny thing was that, a couple hundred meters away from our house, we had a beautiful park. And in the park, we could be, if I was out exercising every day, I could be having a lot of space and a lot of distance between myself and everybody else and getting a lot of fresh air and sunshine and good, healthy things. But as long as I was staying within 100 meters, or we live in a pretty dense area, I was in narrow alleyways with lots of other people. It's like, which one is better here? Is it better for me to be in a tight alleyway with a lot of people? Or is it better for me to be out in the park and out in nature in a wide open space with a lot of space and air between us? And it certainly struck me as the second would be much, much healthier. And I think the government started to realize that too, because when the second lockdown came, they said, okay, we're going to make an exception. Like, you can only go a certain distance from your house. I think at that point it was 1 kilometer from your house. But if a park starts within 1 kilometer of your house, you can continue exercising within the park. You don't have to stay within that narrow area and just stay on one little edge of the park, which is in with the kilometer. They said, like, you know what? Exercise and air is good. And I think this is really kind of the government understanding, finally, this principle that we learn in today's daf, which is that we need to give people a permitted outlet. Being in the park and being outside, well, that was a kind of a good, healthy outlet for people. And that if we tried to tell people, no, you can't go anywhere, no, stay by your house, they're just going to go nuts and they're going to be breaking the rules left, right, and center. But it's better, if we give them kind of a healthy way to go out and get exercise and get sunshine, and we, ease the restrictions a bit and say, we'd rather you not be in these really narrow alleyways and congregating in with a lot of people. We'd rather you go to a big outdoor space where the odds of spreading disease are a lot less. So we're going to leave that open as more of an exception and use that. That's okay. We're going to give you a healthy outlet for exercise so you don't go and do too many of the unhealthy outlets. So that's really what we're getting today. It's like if you force people, you say, no, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. People are going to say, well, screw it. I'm doing whatever I want. Why should I listen to you? You're just not allowing me to live my life. But if you say to people, okay, this way is really bad. We really want you to avoid that. So we're providing this other thing. We're saying, okay, go do this. Go have your exercise. Go have your outlets. Go do it over here in a way that is going to be less potentially harmful. And that's what we have on the daf today. Letting blood from your animal, which is a very hard to understand example today, but made sense back then, in these certain places would make it invalid as an offering, so please don't do those. So here are the other places on the animal where it's okay to be letting the blood, and that will allow you to have a permitted way so you don't do something that is not permitted.